Hi guys, bienvenidos a Todo Vida podcast. We are officially on episode 23. I wanted to start off by thanking all of you listeners who are new here, or even those that are reoccurring listeners that are just tuning in whenever I drop an episode. If you guys don't already have your notifications on, make sure to just turn them on, whether that's for YouTube, even Spotify. That way, whenever I do drop a new episode, you guys can go ahead and tune in. But if you guys are new here, again, bienvenidos. We're on episode 23. And if you are new here, and for those of you who are, like I said, reoccurring listeners, then you guys already know kind of the gist of this podcast, what we talk about. This year has been all about just moving forward overall, but also too, I talk about topics that resonate with me. That's something that I've always said. Just because I have a platform does not mean that I know the answers to everything. However, I like to talk about topics that not only resonate with me, but that can just relate to a lot of people. So on today's topic, I'm going to be talking about kind of two things I think that a lot of us experience that I think really affect one another or kind of just coincide with one another, if that kind of makes sense. So I feel like from what I've been able to learn and see over the years, I feel like for someone who's always been in survival mode, I feel like sometimes it's easier for us to stay in survival mode and know how to continue to not sink, continue to be able to swim. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, if you've been someone who's been in survival mode all your life, or we'll give the example of like toxic relationships, right? I feel like that's become so familiar to you that you know how to stay afloat with something like that, versus when something healthy comes into your life, you really don't know how to accept it. And you get to see where there's certain wounds that are still pretty fresh. And I think what happens a lot of times is that we tend to kind of shove it so deep and just tuck it away so much that we sometimes don't even know that they're still there. And I think that when we tend to do that, because we are unaware of the fact that we've tucked it so down deep, it makes us unaware of the things that we need to work on. And it also makes us more susceptible to, I think, manipulation. And that's something that is, I think that when you are so used to being in survival mode, you always want to give the next person the benefit of the doubt. So again, like I said, it leaves you susceptible to manipulation, and you don't end up realizing that you're giving someone too much of the benefit of the doubt, and it leaves you on the short end of the stick. So given that I've already said that, we're going to just dive right into it. I think that over the years, especially with this podcast, I've had it for like going on a year and a half. I've been very transparent with my journey and just constantly being in realignment, which I think is when you're an ambitious person, that's something that you're constantly going through. You're constantly wanting to realign yourself and just be self-aware as well. So if you guys watched the last episode, I had the pastor of Broken Hearts Ministry on this podcast, and we were talking a lot about forgiveness, how to be able to move forward, things like that. And believe it or not, outside of this episode, we had never had a really one-on-one conversation. So we ended up meeting up. We went to breakfast. And when I was there, I was kind of curious. I was like, what does she want to keep a relationship with me for? And I don't mean that in a bad way, right? But she was just like, Mija, there's something so special about you. There's the way that you carry yourself. Like, there's just something special about you. I really want to still keep in touch. And if I'm being completely honest with you, that's something that I've heard my entire life. And I kind of felt like it was just always like, okay, like, that's what everyone tends to say about me, And I don't mean that in a cocky way at all. That's just me being, again, aware that that's something that I've heard in my entire life. So we go to breakfast or whatever. And she tells me, she's like, Mija, she's like, I feel like you have a lot of healing to do. Right. And I kind of look at her with like a sense of pride. Right. Because I'm like, well, what makes you say that? And she tells me, she's like, I feel like the enemy has felt so comfortable taking away anything you've ever loved. And I was like, okay. And if I'm being completely transparent, which I always am on this podcast, I'll go ahead and disclose that after I tell you guys what she tells me. But she tells me, to start off, she tells me, I feel like the enemy has been so comfortable with taking away anything you've ever loved. She said, I feel like to an extent your parents have abandoned you and kind of like left you to figure things out. And she tells me, and I feel like the one mother figure you had, you ended up losing. Right. So again, for those of you who are new here, let me just kind of break it down. And this isn't for me to be a broken record. This is just for me to clarify. Okay. So one thing that I've always wanted, right, that the enemy has always taken away is the idea of a partnership and a family. And not because I'm scared to be alone, but just because I never saw that growing up. Second, I show a lot of grace towards my dad because I feel like my dad was trying to figure it out himself growing up, especially raising me. He's always told me like there's no guidebook to being a parent. So he was trying to figure it out while having me. I am the only girl out of all boys. So that was definitely new to him. Doesn't matter the age that he was at. That was something that was new to him. My mom, she was a young mom. She wasn't in the picture too much, but I don't hold any grudges. That's just to kind of give you guys context of how this pastor, she hit it on the head. Like, she hit it on the head so well. And then the last one, of course, she talks about me losing the mother figure that I had, which was my only sense of guidance, right? Was my grandmother. So when she tells me that, I felt like someone had kind of just pulled off my mask, because I'm like, whoa, how do you know that? Like, who told you that, you know? And she told me, like, you know, God has called me to you, and I've never pushed religion on this podcast, but I've always tried to let you guys know to keep faith at the center of things, just because I feel like that's what helps you to be accountable, self-aware, especially being an ambitious person. You have to constantly realign yourself and become, not become self-aware, but stay self-aware. And it's okay to stumble. It's okay to be learning along the way, as long as you're constantly realigning yourself. So whatever. She tells me this, and I start telling her the context of my life and how things have gone, right? And like, when I told her that, I was just like, maybe she's right. Maybe there are things that I need to heal from, because I got to get a small glimpse. I got to get a very small glimpse to where surface level, I thought I was in something super, super healthy, right? So when I'm getting a small glimpse of what it's like, and this is a thing, at surface level, a lot of things can look healthy, right? But when you look deeper, you realize like, oh, not everything is as it kicks out to be. And that's where I think manipulation comes into play. And let me tell you guys why. Because, you know, have you guys ever heard the saying, like, a wolf in sheep's clothing? He's not going to come right out and just be a wolf. They're going to mask themselves behind sheep's clothing, right? And so let me tell you guys where these two topics coincide. So I feel like I've always been so used to being in what's the word? Like, I've always been chaos. I've always been so used to being in chaos in everything. And to a certain extent, I started to thrive in chaos, right? When I first opened my business, I had no savings. And, you know, I've talked about the story about when, you know, the owner of my last rental property sold the house. I needed to find a way to go. And, you know, I figured it all out because I started to thrive in chaos, right? And that became normal to me, thriving in chaos. So when anything started to appear, and again, key word here, appear healthy, I started to want to like retain that so bad, because I'm like, okay, I want to keep this. I want to keep this because I'm so used to chaos and I know what to do in chaos. But when something comes at me that seems healthy, I don't know what to do with it. Right. And the next thing you know, I realized like, oh, it wasn't all it kicked out to be. That was actually a form of manipulation. And what that led me to do is that led me to be more susceptible to manipulation, because I think that manipulation tends to trigger and kind of work together with the things that you haven't healed yet from. And I think a lot of us tend to keep things that we haven't healed yet so tucked down deep in ourselves that we don't even know that it needs healing. Right? Because I've said it, and I've been very open on this podcast before. I feel like everything looks great at surface level. I have a business, I'm successful, I'm young, I'm, you know, thriving in my career and this and that. But then there's these parts of me that need to heal, right? And I'll just be completely transparent because I have to be able to identify these things, right? So it's like, okay, so what are these things that I have to heal from? And it's like, well, one, abandonment issues, because I never had anything stable my entire life. When you thrive in chaos, I think that has to do with abandonment issues, because nothing's ever stable long enough for you to obtain it and actually keep it. So what ends up happening is like, when you finally think you have something good, you want to keep it so close to you. And then as time starts to reveal true colors or the reality of situations, right? You tend to also kind of, I don't want to say turn the eye, but you try to see the benefit in the situation, right? So like when you experience manipulation, you see things at a surface level, right? Maybe that person is hiding behind religion, and like whether you're partaking in relationships where this person seems so godly and you're just used to whatever kind of chaotic relationships that you've been in, or, you know, you end up being around people that are so family oriented and you're like, dude, I'm around people that don't have a family foundation, or right. So you see all these things at surface level that look great. They're godly, family oriented, or this person is stable, or it feeds off of the things that you haven't really healed from, which is the fact that you have abandonment issues. It's the fact that because of that, you lack boundaries. So you accept things that you shouldn't. You tend to ignore your intuition. And why do you do that? I'll speak for myself. The reason why I've done that before is because I'm like, oh, I never want to give someone that deserves the benefit of the doubt. I never not want to give it to them. That sometimes, majority of the time, I give too much of the benefit of the doubt. And this isn't about being bitter. This isn't about holding a grudge, because another huge topic that's been, especially on the last episodes, has been forgiveness, right? And how it works in your favor. So this isn't about being bitter or just putting any certain situations on blast. This is strictly like being able to be self-aware. Because if you notice, if you don't heal these parts of you that you've tucked so down deep in yourself, you're going to continue to stumble. And let's be real. A lot of us say, I want this certain type of life. I want a family. I want a healthy relationship. I want this. I want that. But if you got it, would you know what to do with it? No, because you've lacked boundaries for so long. You've lacked healing those parts of you that are still unhealed because you tucked it so down deep. And I understand. And I have a lot of grace for people that are listening right now and are like, yeah, I've been there before too, where I've tucked it so down deep because I don't want to face it. You know what that's called? That's called avoidance. And it takes you being in a situation like that to realize like, well, maybe, yeah, you know what? Maybe they're right. Maybe I haven't healed that part of me, right? And how do you realize that? Because you come across a good situation sometimes can just be based off of manipulation, and you hold on to what seems so good at a surface level that you hold on to it and you almost romanticize the idea of it. And then you realize like, yeah, no, I was just romanticizing, or I was just seeing all the positive in this situation because I wanted to change the true colors of the situation. Like I wanted to appear the picture that seemed so beautiful on the surface, but behind it, it was a whole different ballgame. And I think that that's where, when we don't heal those parts of us, I think that we are more susceptible to manipulation. And I think that it's important to not only be self-aware, it's important to be self-aware, not hold grudges, be able to forgive not only yourself, but the people that have manipulated you, and yourself for being in those positions or in those situations where you have been manipulated, and show grace to yourself, because nobody has a guidebook. Nobody knows like, okay, yeah, I'm being love bombed in this moment. None of us know we're being love bombed. It's that dopamine that just rushes to your brain that feels so good because you're so used to chaos that when something seems so good on the surface level, you're like, I like this feeling. And you give into it so much that then next thing you know, when true colors start to surface and the colors of the pretty picture that were painted start to change, you're still holding on to the idea or the picture of what it was. And I think that's where the blind starts to come off. Like, hold up. Was there any red flags? Was there, and this could be with any situation. It could be you being in a relationship. Like remember guys, when we talk about relationships, like you can have relationships with family members, friends, romantic relationships, right? So never take the word when I use relationships that I'm like the Gandhi of relationships here. Like, no, I don't know everything, right? But it's like, that's where it tends to shine the most, right? And so it's like, when these things start to happen, it's like, you got to have some, okay, so you have to have some accountability, right? But also it starts with self-awareness. And I think there are certain, at least, steps to that process. It's like being self-aware, right? So being self-aware in that process is like, okay, you can't get someone out of your head. You're like, why can't I get this person out of my head? And then you start to look at their true colors. Like, well, did they bring something to the table? Like, did they heal certain parts of you? Are you just romanticizing the idea of them? Like, you have to kind of start to talk to yourself and really like try to be self-aware. Like, why is it that I'm doing this? Right. And then when you tend to do that, you're like, okay, I just like the idea of whatever the picture was painted as. Right. And so then you say, okay, why? So to speak of something outside of a romantic relationship, right? It's like, let's say you haven't had a relationship with your father in years, right? And then they come to you and they're like, yeah, mija or mijo, I'm here for you. I'm going to be here for you. Whatever you need, I got you. Call me up. You need help with this. You need help with that. Like, I'm going to be there, right? And so they tell you that they're always going to be there. But then at surface level, it looks great. They said that they're always going to be there. But then when crisis starts to hit and you need them to be there, they're like, oh, sorry, mija, I'm busy right now. Sorry, I can't be there. And then you forgive them, right? Because you're like, okay, well, you know what? I never had a relationship with this person, you know, my dad. I never had a relationship with my dad. So like, I want to be able to have that. So I'm going to forgive them time and time again. And then you realize that every time you're in a situation, they're not there for you to call on like they made it so beautiful out to be that they were going to be there, right? So then what do? You continue to show grace because nobody ever showed you grace, right? So that's where that manipulation coincides with the sides of you that have never been healed. And that leaves you more susceptible to, again, the manipulation. It's like when something like that, it's not going to hit your strong suits, right? Of like, let's say you have boundaries or this or that. No, it's going to hit your weak points. And your weak points are the things that you haven't healed yet from. So when manipulation comes into play, I think that what tends to happen is like, okay, self-awareness. Let's go back to the steps. It's like being self-aware. It's like, okay, well, why do I keep painting this beautiful picture in my head of the person I thought they were? And it's like, oh, well, because I never had that. So it's almost like you want to see the picture how it was painted and not how the true colors are coming out to be. So then, you know, you see it like that and you're like, okay, you try to be self-aware. You see it for what it is. And then after that is being a little bit graceful with yourself and realizing like, you know what though? Okay, this is why I romanticized the idea of them. This is why I gave them the benefit of the doubt. Now, I didn't know, because let's be real, we never know when there's a wolf in sheep's clothing. We just see the sheep at first take, right? But then eventually that's where you have to start to trust your intuition and see that like anything that's done in the dark comes to light. If someone's true colors are put in the dark, it's going to come to light. If someone said, hey, I don't want to be with you no more due to this reason, and in a few weeks they pop out with someone else, everything done in the dark is going to come to light. And I think that where you have to be a little bit graceful with yourself, because then most people though, right? And this is where I think my audience, specifically my audience, because if you were drawn to this podcast, in any of the reels that you've seen, not only do I talk about real topics, but I talk about things that not a lot of topics on social media want to talk about, right? Because it's very glamorized, it's very like oversaturated. Like nobody talks about real topics like this. But if you heard any of my reels and you can relate to any of it, is because you want to be self-aware. And you're trying to be self-aware and you're an ambitious person and you're trying to grow and you're in constant realignment with yourself, right? So it's like in this chapter of my life, that was something that I realized like, dude, there's so many things that I haven't healed from that when a beautiful picture is presented to me, I take it for the picture that's presented to me, not for the true colors that go to show over time. Because like I said, anything done in the dark is going to come to light. So that's where I have to not only hold myself accountable, but in order for me to hold myself accountable, I have to start off by being self-aware. And I think that when you're an ambitious person, you tend to kind of beat yourself up because you're like, dude, why didn't I see it? Why didn't I know? Why didn't I? You can sit here and stay with the whys. And first of all, for you to even hold yourself accountable and say, why didn't I see it? I think where that sets aside my audience from the regular person, that is just like surface level, is that I think a lot of people tend to victimize themselves where they don't heal these parts of them that need healing because we tuck it away so bad, right? And I get it. It's easier that way because like I said, it's easier to stay in survival. We know what to do. You know, when we're in survival, we know what to do. But when something seems so healthy and apparent, either A, we won't know what to do with it, or two, it's not as healthy as we seemed it out to be. So then what ends up happening is we, again, glorify the pretty picture that was painted to us. And then we go into this cycle. And I think that when people have victim mentality, they're going to constantly be like, well, this person painted it out to be like this to me. And this person made it seem like this. And what happens is you're not able to, you stick in victim mentality so much that you're not able to hold yourself accountable to be like, okay, but why do I continue to do this? Why do I lack boundaries? Why do I lack not seeing the red flags? Why do I not lack seeing, just taking people for who they are? Exactly. And I think that a lot of times we tend to do that. Now, what sets me and my audience aside from the average person is that we're in constant realignment. That yes, life is never going to be linear. As long as we have life, we're going to have problems and things are going to arise. And, I think the same way that God uses people like us to be able to execute blessings, I think the enemy also comes in to be able to use people to like hurt you and stuff. Because relationships, I think any relationship that you have with anyone is based out of love, right? You care for that person, you have love for that person, whatever. You see the great in that person, right? And I think that when those relationships start to hurt us, I think we start to blame, like, whoa, if the man upstairs really cared about us, why would he allow this to happen? And it's like, well, sometimes, same way people like us are used to execute blessings, I think that love was never meant to hurt you. I think that if God ever takes love away from you, it's because he knew it was going to hurt you, and he preferred to take it away before it did, before it ruined you. Love was never meant to ruin you. Whatever, if that's you loving a parent, loving a spouse, loving a friend, loving whatever, And I think that to have compassion and to have love and to still, for those of you that are listening out there that are like, dang, I have so many things to heal from. I think to still be rooted in a place of love despite the things that you've been through is a beautiful thing. And I never want that. I never want that part of my heart personally to change. I just want to be more like aware and just be smarter about the way that I maneuver it and realize where maybe I take a part in my own suffering, because it's like, okay, why are you so susceptible to manipulation? And I think it's because we tend to not heal certain parts in us and we tuck it away so much. And again, giving credit to those who it's easier to tuck away. It's easier to tuck away the things that you need to heal from because it's safe, right? I think looking in the mirror is the hardest thing that you can do because you realize how much you have to grieve, you have to just overall be able to work through. And I think that that's the hardest part, because it's the hardest part because we have to forgive. We have to forgive the people that hurt us. We have to forgive and grieve maybe the childhood that we never had, the examples we never had. But I think that saves us in the long run, because if not, you're not going to heal those sides of you. And then what happens in adulthood is that you're going to continue to be more susceptible to relationships that are based off of manipulation or not being able to see the love bombing that first happens, or just not being able to see people's true colors overall. If you don't want to call it love bombing, you can just call it the pretty picture that people at first paint, because nobody is ever going to put their true colors forward, or like the pastor said, live in their truth. Nobody really fully lives in their truth. Like I said, a wolf in sheep's clothing is never going to come off in his truth that he's a wolf. They're going to come off in sheep's clothing. But while we cannot control the actions of others, we can only control ourselves and be like, dude, if I don't heal these sides of me, back to what the pastor told me, it's like, well, I feel like the enemy's always taking away the things that you've never had. And it's like, okay, well, what was that for me? And that, again, maybe some of you guys can relate to this. For me, it was, I've always wanted a family. I've always wanted to see the things that I never had growing up, which is like being able to be in a good relationship and right. But if I never heal that part of me, it's like, well, how do I heal? And it's like being comfortable with being alone. And if you ask me, it's like, oh, I'm not uncomfortable being alone, but I do prefer to have that family unit and this and that, and because I've overpoured in that sector of my life versus overpouring in myself, that's where I've been more susceptible to manipulation and love bombing and seeing seeing the colors that people present to have instead of seeing their true colors. And that's where I have accountability and I take a part in my own suffering, which I think a lot of us tend to do, right? Because if I was just like, well, you know what? Okay, I never saw that growing up. I might not never see it. I might not never have it. However, instead of overpouring in that sector of my life, I'm going to overpour into myself and have that richness in my own life and have that love. Like, because self-love is like a top tier. You're never going to get that from a partner. You're never going to get that from anybody else, a family member. Self-love is top tier. So maybe the love that you're seeking for, if you have those abandonment issues from your childhood, maybe that love that you're seeking so bad should be in yourself that you need to pour into. So it's like, and trust me, you hear this and you think I have it all figured out. And I'm figuring it out along the way. And I think that I was telling my producer off camera, like, I think maybe why I was slightly avoidant to record is because I didn't know what I was facing myself. But I think where my strongest attribute to this podcast has been is being transparent. And my transparency has been able to resonate with so many people. So let's go back to that. So the first thing was, that the enemy has felt so comfortable taking away anything I've ever loved. Why? Because I've glorified that more than I've glorified self-love. So boom, first mistake. Accountability hurts, right? Because it's easier for me to blame this on other people. And, I was a good person, but they never gave that in return to me. And it's like, but you didn't see that you're overpouring in others versus yourself. So again, and being gracious with myself, being graceful with myself and seeing like, I didn't know any better. I just thought that if I got the opportunity I never had growing up, then I would get that in return. And it's like, no, the only person that's going to be able to give you the opportunity that you never had, aside from God, is yourself. So let's start there. So that was the first thing she hit on the head. Second thing that she hit on the head was saying that, like, I had been abandoned by my parents, and while trust me, I am fully aware that my dad tried to do the best that he could growing up. On the other aspect, as far as like my mom goes, I think it's all about forgiveness and showing grace. I completely was abandoned there. Like, and I'm not trying to like play victim mentality at all. But if you ask me who taught me how to do my makeup, if you ask me who taught me how to cook and clean, if you ask me who taught me about the basics of a woman, like when you get your menstrual cycle, shaving, X, Y, and Z, I didn't have that growing up, like at all. So then how has that become a weakness of mine? That whenever I feel welcomed, no matter the circumstance or what the picture is beneath surface level, I stick around. And I put myself in situations where I give too many people the benefit of the doubt, with, in return, having people in my corner. And I'm not scared to be alone, but I mean, who doesn't want to have family? If you ask me what I do for the holidays, I've been pretty transparent with it the last few years. At least the last year, I've been comfortable with just being by myself because I realized, well, that's better than thinking that I have people in my corner that aren't really there, And I'm not sitting here and I'm not like, boohoo crying about it. No, because I know I have a lot of people in my corner. I know that I have a lot of people that God has sent me to be my tribe, but I'm not gonna, it's different. It's like, it's different because it's not like a family unit. You know what I'm saying? So because I haven't healed that side of me, whenever I get into, let's say, for me, I'm speaking for me here, whenever I get into a relationship where I feel so welcome by a family, I stick around. And then when my time is over and I'm, dropped so quick, I end up hurt. And it's like, well, maybe I should just come to the reality that it's like, I don't need to have anybody in my corner. I'm actually I'm actually more at peace being by myself than having to fear losing anybody else. And why am I susceptible to that happening to me? Because I don't heal that side in me. Now I'm coming to terms and I'm realizing it, and I think that that's the beauty in all of this, is constantly being in realignment, constantly being an ambitious person, whether that's in your career or in your personal growth, in your spiritual growth. And let me tell you, like, any of the things that I've encountered, either due to manipulation, love bombing, or just the lack of me healing the parts in me that need healing, right? Because I've tucked it so deep down. I think that the beauty in it is like I've never held grudges and I've never allowed these moments to get me out of character. What I do hold myself accountable for is that sometimes I start to like think like, well, maybe I did something wrong, or maybe I did this, maybe I did that. And then, it just takes the right person to vent to, or it takes the right like perspective that you get from somebody else to be like, okay, but did you ruin that? Or did you or why is it like that for you? Or maybe it's even me talking to myself and realizing, and no one's going to know you better than you know yourself. So if you see yourself constantly being at the hands of manipulation, or you constantly see yourself kind of getting like your weak spots triggered, you have to be able to talk with yourself and realize like why. Now, majority of the people, probably not my audience members that are willing to be in victim mentality, will continue to blame the other party. But I think when you start to become self-aware, you start to establish boundaries. Like that's the most important thing that I've learned here in order for me to not constantly be in situations where I have to keep just forgiving people, you know, because while that is important, right? Like while that is important, because something that it says in the Bible is like, you have to forgive someone 70 times 7 times. And that's in a day, right? Look, bro, I don't got to put myself through 70 times 7 situations to see the same outcome, to then victimize myself of why I have to keep forgiving this person. Granted, I could forgive you maybe like the 3rd, 4th, 5th time. And if it comes down to it, yeah. But what I'm trying to say is like, you don't have to put yourself in that many scenarios, because then what ends up happening when you get something good, if you don't heal from this, you start to self-sabotage and you start to self-destruct. And if you do end up obtaining the things that you so badly want, right? Which is a result of the things that you haven't healed from, right? If you end up getting the dream family and the dream partner and the dream this and that, right? It's like, would you really know what to do with it right away? So I feel like this only resonates to the people that know exactly what I'm talking about, where you've shoved things that you need to heal from so deep down within yourself that you almost don't even know it's there. And personally, for me, that's where having that conversation with the pastor, of her telling me, like, I just feel like you have a lot of healing to do. And me, you know, so proud. I was just like, what makes you say that? Because surface level, everything looks great. And then when she hit these things on the head of like, well, I feel like, you know, enemy's taking away everything you've ever felt like you loved. And I was just like, okay, that was pretty accurate. And when she tells me about the abandonment, I'm like, oh, that's pretty accurate. And when she tells me the one thing that you had that you loved the most, that I knew was consistent in my life, which was my grandmother, and she went away, I was like, dang, okay. Like that made me realize like maybe this is why I allow so many other things. And you would think that because I have a podcast, you would think that because, you know, because a lot of us, we chase materialistic validation, right? Or like we chase validation that is very like career oriented, like, oh, when I get this job, or again, back to the materialistic thing, like once I get this place or once I get this, like you think that you're going to have it all figured out. And my transparency in this entire episode, or not episode, this entire podcast has been like, look, I understand coming from this kind of background because I've been very open with my background, right? And coming from this background, it's okay as long as you persevere from it. But then once you persevere from it, don't just stay surface level of having these nice things. There's still spiritual work that needs to be done. There's still emotional work that needs to be done. There's still a lot of things that you have to constantly realign yourself within. And when you do that, be graceful with yourself, because you didn't know any better. And speaking from my perspective, if you've had to be in survival mode, chances are you didn't have any guidance. Because if you had someone there guiding you, why would you be in survival mode? Right? And maybe the people that were trying to guide you, maybe they didn't know how to do it themselves, right? So you had to guide yourself and so on and so forth. But the reason why I wanted to be so open with this topic is because I think we constantly put ourselves in a situation where there's reoccurring pain that happens when you're in these situations. And you're constantly like wondering, like, what could I have done better? What did I not do? What did I do? Right? And it's like, okay, all you could do is learn from it. Because when you learn from it, you're going to start to establish the boundaries. You're going to start to want better, do better. And you're going to learn from these situations to not put yourself in that situation again. And if you can learn from that, then maybe it'll start to heal the parts of you that are unhealed, right? So like, instead of me, for example, one thing I talked about was like abandonment. So instead of me receiving anything that comes my way, not to say that I have, right? But when a pretty picture is presented to me and I come to receive that and romanticize that, instead of just allowing someone's true colors to kind of just, like, how would you say like desarrollar in English? Like, pretty much it's like when it starts to transpire, when their true colors start to transpire over time, right? Instead of romanticizing the idea of what it could have been, you start to just see their true colors and you start to see it for what it is. And you are less likely to be in situations where you're love bombed, manipulated, or simply like stick with the idea of what things could have been. And that's with any relationships. Develop. There you go. There you go. Yeah, when you pretty much start to let their true colors develop, right? Because I think that's what happens to a lot of us is like when you have these abandonment issues or when you have like no boundaries, right? You allow things to occur like love bombing. And then when love bombing occurs, you don't allow people's true colors to develop over time. You're like, wait. We're 2 weeks in. Why are you letting me meet your family so fast? Right. And I'm guilty of that. I did that. Like, that's where you have to hold yourself accountable because like nobody forced you to go. Nobody forced you to go and meet their family on the second week, girl. You wanted to be there. Why? Because you haven't healed the side of you that says, you know what? Screw it. I don't have my own family, but I'd rather be alone than in bad company. Como hay el dicho en español, prefiero estar sola que mal acompañada. You know? And the thing is like, okay, these people could be great people, right? I'm not saying walk around traumatized, but allow people's true colors to develop over time. Because when you have those healthy boundaries that you allow things to develop over time, you're not going to be so naive to love bombing, manipulation. And if you encounter it, it's fine. Show yourself some grace. But you have to be able to be aware, point it out, and then fix it. Align yourself. Be ambitious with not just your goals, not just like your career. Be ambitious with your spiritual growth. Be ambitious with your emotional growth. Be ambitious with your mental growth. Like, we have to learn from situations, and you're not going to get anywhere by sitting there and beating yourself up about what coulda, shoulda, would have been. Why didn't I learn this way? Or why do I keep getting in these situations? Like, if it's something that's reoccurring, is because God is trying to show you time and time again what it is so that you can learn. Because once you start to see things for what it is, you start to move differently. And that's what happened to me, where I constantly was overpouring. And it's like, wait, why are you overpouring though? Why are you not pouring into yourself? Because then that led me to be hurt. I would overpour into everything else minus myself. And that led me to be hurt. And I'd be so hurt that I'd be like I would just, and that's the thing, like things like that, deception, I think is something that takes you a long time to recover. Especially, it takes you a long time to recover from, because you sit there and you think like, why didn't I see it? But they said this, but they did that. And why, instead of seeing the red flags, why did I just show so much grace? And what, I think when you go through deception, it's something that's really hard to bounce back from, because giving into that dopamine or the love bomb or like whatever, right? When people paint this beautiful picture, it's so easy to give into, but getting out of that is way harder. The benefit of it though, is that when you experience it enough times, when the blind finally comes off, you take people for what they are. And that's okay. You can take people for who they are without having resentment, without, having that bitterness in your heart. You can do that. Moving forward though, it's about moving more with just smarter, just overall, just moving smarter. There's honestly no way around it. So what I wanted to tell you guys here is just heal those parts in you that are so tucked away, because I do understand that it's easier to stay in survival than it is to be in healthier relationships. And sometimes relationships can appear to be healthy, surface level. And then over time, people's true colors start to develop. And to avoid romanticizing the idea of what could have been or what it appeared to be, be graceful with yourself enough to realize like, okay, you know what? I have to be self-aware here. And I think that manipulation tends to coincide with your weaknesses, right? Because it's so easy to be manipulated when you haven't healed yet, that what ends up happening is that you fall to deception, and then that's harder to pick up from, but we've all encountered it. We all have. Even me having a platform or whatever success you guys want to credit me out to have, I think that when you tend to still have that, like you still tend to, be susceptible to that. People think that because I have a platform, I'm the exception. And I've always said I'm not the exception. I'm learning along the way. And my strongest attribute to this podcast has been being vulnerable and transparent. And I'm learning along the way, just like with all of you. And I think that that's something that is the beauty and personally my platforms and my podcast as well. The beauty in it has been that I'm transparent and that I'm trying to learn. And it doesn't matter the age. It doesn't matter the success. It doesn't matter what career you have, the business. It doesn't matter. Like all these surface level things do not matter. We're all learning as we go. And while you're learning, hold yourself accountable, but also be graceful with yourself. Like hold yourself accountable enough to be willing to realign, but also as well, be graceful with yourself to not sit there and beat yourself up, because the clock doesn't move backwards. We can't fix things that already happened. However, moving forward, though, you can maneuver a little bit differently. And that does start with healing those sides of you. And how do you start to heal them? Because everyone's probably thinking like, well, how do you start to heal them? Be aware of them. Be aware of them. And then kind of go down like I don't want to say a rabbit hole, but like think of like, okay, like almost like kind of like where you have a topic circled, right? Of like what you haven't yet healed from and what that allows you to tolerate. So if you have abandonment issues, right? And you tend to constantly be in low quality relationships, whether that be with friends, family members, or potential people that partners, whatever, right? When you have abandonment issues, you're willing to tolerate and put up with all these other things. So it's like, identify the issue, try to move forward, and don't allow yourself to be so, like I said, susceptible to manipulation, because a wolf in sheep's clothing is never going to come off as a wolf. They're always going to come off in sheep's clothing. And when that happens to you, be graceful with yourself, but continue to move forward and hold yourself accountable and say, okay, you know what? If I don't heal from these things, I'm going to continue to be in the same situations. And sometimes, yeah, if you have faith and like, yeah, God is, he's graceful, he's merciful, but he's also a gentleman, and he's going to let you learn on your own. And when you get tired of the same situation, you're going to get tired enough to want to create a difference. When you're not tired of something, or when you claim to be tired of something and you don't cause a shift or a difference, you're not tired enough. And I've always told people, if you say you're tired of something, be willing to change it. And if you don't change it, stay where you're at and don't complain. Simple as that, But if you are tired of it and you weren't even aware, like you even hearing this episode, you're like, dang, okay, maybe that's why I tolerated so many things. Moving forward, just try to put boundaries into play. And when you are healing these parts of you, don't move with bitterness in your heart. Honestly, I've had so many situations where I look back and I'm like, dude, why did I show that much grace? Why did I show them that much forgiveness? Why did I, not put them on blast? Or why? And honestly, granted, I'm human. That's going to be my first thought because it's sinful, right? To just like, put them on blast or do this or call them out. But that exudes way more energy than if I just kept it moving, honestly. So it's like, don't ever let yourself get that low. I think that's something that I've always said is like, and I've always tried to stay true to is like, I will never allow this world to turn my good heart cold. Because for what? Instead, I can look at the cup half full instead of half empty. And instead of victim mentality, the situation, and be like, well, why did they make it seem like this? Why did they make it seem like that? Well, they said this and they said that. Be like, okay, why did you fall so easily to temptation? Because you haven't healed from these things yet. And a lot of us, I think the roadblock in healing is forgiveness. We're not willing to forgive, or we move around with bitterness. I refuse to walk around that way because it exudes a lot more energy than if I just moved with grace. And I remember telling one of my clients, I was like, I'm so mad. I had so much grace for this person and I had so much grace. And she said, it's better to move with grace than have acted out of character because things didn't go your way. Because you moving with grace, and this goes for anybody. And this is something that I think everybody should take with them from this episode. When you move with grace, you make an imprint on people's lives. Because instead of you acting out of anger because things didn't go your way, you showed grace. And then later on in life, when that person has to remember you or think of you or come across them looking for parts of you in other people and they don't find it, they can sit there and be like, wow, this person showed me grace even when I didn't deserve it. And that in itself makes an imprint. So hold yourself accountable, be graceful with yourself, create a change, and along the way, move with grace. Don't let nobody get you out of character. It hurts. I promise you, I know it hurts and I know it sucks, But we fell to that temptation or that beautiful picture that anybody can paint because we have certain parts in us that haven't healed. And it's easier to tuck those pieces away than to confront them head on. The hardest thing that you're ever going to do is look in the mirror. But I'd rather move with grace, 10 out of 10, than act out of anger. And that's just never going to be me. That's not even in my code. Granted, we all have these thoughts, right? I try to fully ignore those thoughts, right? Of like, oh, well, I could have said this, or I could have done that, or what. I promise you, life is always a full circle. Tables do turn and prayers do work. That's all I'm gonna say with that. So being with that said, just know that there's never a guidebook to any of this. We're all learning along the way. That, like I said, that's been my biggest attribute to this podcast, is being transparent, vulnerable, and letting you guys know, no matter the platform, business, whatever, nobody is ever the exception to being a student in life. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode 23. Prepare to see a lot more of me, all right? I'm sick and tired of just not being as present for you guys as I feel like I should. But just know that even when I'm not working on this podcast, I'm always working behind the scenes. I do have a business where I remain, and that's what helps me fund this podcast ultimately. Self-Care by Ash LLC. If you guys are ever in the Inland Empire, you guys would like to come get a service by me. If you guys don't know what I do, yes, I'm a coochie waxer. What about it? The razor could never grow. All right. So that's all I'm going to say. But if you guys are interested, follow me on my business page, Self-Care by Ash LLC. If you guys don't want to follow me on that, and that's totally fine, just stick to the podcast, Todo, Vida podcast. We're on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music. Just go ahead and tune in. And I hope to be able to deliver much more messages. Again, I'm just the vessel. And yeah, with a humble heart, I say peace out. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys were able to take something from this episode, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.